global citizens. Welcome to the latest webinar in the series of e-conferences organized by the Boston Pledge to celebrate their 20th anniversary. My name is Anjum Malik, and I'm a proud member of the Boston Pledge family since last year. It is my honor and my pleasure to be opening the seminar for you today. This web is particularly special as it uses the theme of civilization at the point of inflection to bring together thought leaders from around the world to discuss this overarching call to action, which ties in so beautifully to Dr. Sam Pitroda's new book, Design the World, a Global Call to Action. The Boston Pledge itself is a nonprofit organization that brings together outstanding professionals who are committed to public service from various spheres of life, professional disciplines, and geographical locations to directly address issues at the base of the pyramid. While we are proud to be based in Boston, USA, we are also proud and privileged to have networks and connections around the globe. You will see that we have with us not just global thought leaders, but audience members that are from China, Japan, North America, South Asia, and other seminal parts of this planet Earth that we are so proud and privileged to share together. Civilization at the point of inflection is definitely a very thought-provoking webinar for today. If we were to delve a little into what inflection means, we'll find that it is a grammatical term which connotes a change in the form of a word, typically the ending, to express a grammatical function or attribute such as tense, mood, person, number, case, or gender. It can be used to add further nuance, meanings, or in the case of today's webinar, a paradigm shift in the present and the future of our world and where we intend to take it. Of course, these are just general musings from a member of the Boston Pledge family who had the privilege of joining at the same as the COVID pandemic took over the world. And for me, it is both a pride and a privilege to be opening this webinar today because I myself am going through a very significant inflection in my life. This is the first webinar that I'm hosting as a married woman, and my spouse and I are particularly eager, enthusiastic, and active to see how we can use our joint inflection to create an impact in our communities throughout the world. I leave it to my colleagues who are more experienced connoisseurs in the Boston Pledge and in the spheres of service to humanity to talk more about where we intend to take this webinar today. Please let me invite on screen now my colleague and senior member of the Boston Pledge, Devinder Singh, who is joining us from India and has done a great deal of work in the service to humanity. Not only is he a core member of the Boston Pledge, but he is also the Chief Program Officer for Glory of Humanity and founder of the Will Flow movement. Devinder Singh, it's all yours.
Thank you, Anjum, for your kind words. Greetings from Bengal with folded hands and my deepest reverence to everyone watching this significant session. It is my distinct honor to share this virtual space with visionaries like Dr. Sam Pitroda, Dr. Lawrence Kaufman, Dr. John Hodgman, Dr. Shin Ito, Dr. Jin Chen, Mr. Masakazu Toyoda, Dr. Partha Ghosh, and my dear friend Anjum Malik. Friends, COVID crisis has made us feel the need of fundamental corrections. It has become essential to collaborate, cooperate, and co-create with composure, compassion, hope, and courage. I firmly believe it is the time to reimagine redesign, replan, rebuild, and rediscover a new world full of opportunities for meaningful coexistence. Friends, the Boston Pledge is in the service of humankind since last 20 years, bringing outstanding professionals together to work to strengthen the fundamental forces which drive the advancement of human civilization. We have programs like number one, ESP, the flagship program, Entrepreneurship Springboard Program. TBP fosters an enterprising spirit at the grassroots level. Number two, EDSP, Educator Springboard Program, which enables educators from over 5 continents to share perspectives, ideas, motivation, pedagogies, and inspiration. We reached close to 1,000 educators when the world was under lockdown during the pandemic. Number three, a center of excellence for training rural folks in a remote village called Lokhikantapur in Bengal, India. Number four, TBP Digital, to share free learning resources worldwide, which also offers a platform to volunteer for public service. Friends, personally, I'm on a journey called Glory, Growth and Livelihood Opportunities for Rural Youth, to co-create 1 million sustainable livelihood opportunities in the next 5 years. It may not be possible to think of this ambitious target without the spirit of Boston Pledge. I thank the entire TBP family, the core leadership, and the visionary chairman, Dr. Partha Ghosh, for being the bedrock of the Glory program. Now, to take this session forward, let me invite my friend, philosopher, guide, and mentor, Dr. Partha Ghosh, the chairman of the Boston Pledge, a strategic problem solver, global thought leader, professor of practice, Tufts University and MIT, former senior McKinsey, partner of McKinsey. The list is long. In short, let me respectfully invite a man who is silently serving the humanity with his deep understanding of science, philosophy, economics, and governance. Respectfully, over to you, Dr. Ghosh.
Thank you. Thank you. You have used so many adjectives. You have left very little for me to introduce Sam Pitroda. I thought you were describing Sam, not me. But, we have started the journey today, and I think it is a very great journey. Firstly, Anjum, congratulations for getting married yesterday to celebrate today's big journey, which Sam would lay out for us. So thank you very much. Thanks to all my friends from Japan, Pitroda-san, Ito-san, my friends in China, Chen. I'll introduce all of you, and of course, John and Larry from New England area. I was thinking about what would be the best way to introduce Sam, because Sam, as many of you may know, is a wonder. Wonder, there could be the eighth wonder of the world, if there's the eighth one. And I will explain why in a moment. To do so, I would like to make a small presentation, which I delivered about 7 years ago in California. And the title of that presentation was Civilization at the Point of Inflection. And I think it will lay out beautifully the backdrop on which I think we'll begin a conversation with Sam, so we can hear from the mind of the genius how he sees the challenges of the world. And then through the panel discussion, we will unfold the great thoughts that she has presented in the book, The Redesign of the World. So let me quickly share, and I would just about take 5 minutes to basically set up. It's not my presentation today is all about Sam, but I think it would be important that I share a story which I shared in California over about 60 minutes in 2 minutes or three. And the basic story goes this way, that both at the macro and the micro level, we are seeing huge changes. On one side, as we all know, there's a major geopolitical disorder. There used to be a kind of a balance of power, if you will, till about 1990s with the fall of the Berlin Wall. We have been in a continuous state of geopolitical disorder. There's diffuse terrorism. We do not know where the terrorists exist. Now with the COVID-19, it has even become more severe. The center of gravity of the world is shifting, the economic gravity. It used to be largely in the Atlantic. Now it is shifting towards the Pacific thanks to developments in China and the eastern part of Asia, Japan, led by Japan and South Korea. We know about the COVID-19 assault. And what I find most interesting, which you see on the left-hand side, is the conflict of isms. On one side, we talk about capitalism, but it has not been able to deliver. Socialism has collapsed. We talk about globalism, but as you know, with the breakdown of the global supply chain, with the rise of nationalism, tribalism, all the progress that we made in the name of globalization has been challenged. Many countries are struggling to define what is democracy, including the United States, which has been the flagship of democracy over the last 250 years. But unfortunately, as you know, it has taken a shape which is very different from the kind of democratic setup that we like to see in the world. So obviously, it is ceasing to be a model for the world. On the other side, we know autocracies hasn't worked. And there's a third model developing in China, which we call state-owned capitalism. But one party, what does that mean, is something that we have to also think about. So I'm glad that we have our friends from Japan and China to bring an Eastern world perspective. But on the micro side also, there's a big change taking place. There's convergence of technologies, and we'll be hearing from Sam, the artificial intelligence, the 5G. But I question, how does the AI and the NI, which is the natural intelligence, how would they synchronize in different status of the economy? It's a big question we would like to answer today. Then there's a question of physical versus knowledge assets, new business models. But then the question of, when we think of what's happening with Facebook, people are asking the relevance of such companies and their effect on society. And then, of course, we are talking about people putting profits over purpose. So the big challenge I see is how the macro and the micro world being in two different ways transforming, creating an increasing tension, which I call the mega tornado right at the beginning. So that sets up beautifully what I would like to see we cover today in terms of, given the tornado, given the mega changes, both on the bottom of the pyramid as well as the top of the pyramid, the macro versus the micro, we are uncomfortable the way the world has shaped. And then at the same time, we have to recognize, I would not get into the details, the multiple hotspots around the world. The tensions in Korean Peninsula, the South China Sea issue, the Rohingya crisis, you can go on, right from the left to right, from the east to west, from north to south. There are some serious tensions which are also happening at the same time. And literally thousands of people are losing their jobs, thousands of people are getting disrupted, which is real, which is getting unaddressed. At the same time, 5 new spaces are emerging. I call the 5 new domains of spaces: the artificial intelligence space, the cyberspace, the real space, thanks to all the adventures of Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Branson's, then the spiritual space, which also I think is becoming important, not yet developed, but will become important, and the green economy circular space. So these 5 spaces indeed are emerging. The big question that I'll ask Sam, that if this is true, and if this spaces emerge, how we could, at the early stage of development, give shape to these spaces, which could bring a better quality advancement of the civilization and bring more civility in our progress. So indeed, we are at a point where there's a tornado, and we have to think of the new S-curve, and we have to think of a new dial, I call the leadership dial, which is not in terms of GDP per capita maybe, maybe not in terms of how do we look at success of a country. It's a need for a new dial. And then we have to think of how do we shift the needle and what are those levers that we have to work towards so the needle is positioned in the right place in the new dial. So there are a lot of questions. What is the new dial? How will the needle move? And what are the levers? Because you would see what Sam would talk about is indeed a picture of the new world along multiple dimensions. So the way we would unfold today's discussion is to begin a conversation. And Sam and I agreed that I would raise questions, he will answer, and we'll do that for the first 20 minutes. Then we'll have the panel come in and reflect and question and make your comments. And then Devender would lead us through a Q&A with a wider audience who has participated also from all over the world. They are themselves thought leaders. I'm very impressed with the kind of response we have received from various thought leaders from all over the world. Each one of them many of them could deserve a Nobel Prize, but Nobel Committee works in interesting ways also. So with that, I think I will go back to the conversation. So Sam, firstly, we are all honored to have you with us today. And I know I've got a lot of comments come from all over the world, literally waiting to hear your voice, not my voice. So let me begin with the first question. And I will make the questions as difficult as possible. That's what you want from me, Sam. So please bear with me. The first question I have, that on one side, if one reads the book, you feel that many things are not working today. The systems are not working. Whether you think from the governance point of view, whether you think from the ism point of view, whichever view you take, the role of the United Nations, the role of the WTO, role of the World Bank. On the other side, if I look at your story, coming all the way from Orissa to Baroda to Aden to Chicago, getting your PhD, changing the world, you are a success story. So someone would say, if I follow Sam, I have to agree the system is working, but the system is not working. How do you connect this two?
Thank you, Partha. Before I begin, I want to thank you and the Boston Pledge Group for giving me this opportunity. I want to thank Anjum, Devendra Singh, and all our distinguished panelists for taking time from their busy schedule to come join me. It is indeed an honor and privilege for me to be with you, Partha. I remember 20 years ago when you started Boston Pledge, I was there. So I've seen the journey, and my compliments to you that you could sustain it for 20 years. That itself is an accomplishment. So we started by saying civilization is at the point of inflection. I believe that is true mainly because of hyperconnectivity. I have spent 55 years of my life on connectivity. For the first time in the history of mankind, we are all connected. What does it mean to have connected world? Unfortunately, we use connectivity to do the same thing we have been used to doing in the past, little better, little cheaper, little faster. As opposed to using connectivity to do things we have never done before. And the example you gave about my journey is not good enough because not many people get that opportunity. It is just one simple example. So we are at inflection point because hyperconnectivity gives us unique opportunity to redesign everything. During Corona crisis, I was locked up at home like many of us for 18 months. That's the time I decided to look at my own journey. I was born in British Raj in India 80 years ago. And I have seen a great deal in terms of India's independence, birth of transistor, death of Mahatma Gandhi, Kennedy, liberalization, Mandela, Martin Luther King, Vietnam War. All of that is part of a journey that I have taken. And when I look at that journey, I realize that the world was last designed just about the time I was born, 80 years ago. That design gave birth to UN, World Bank, NATO, WTO, WHO, GDP, GNP. And that design has done pretty well. It has given rule-based system, which I believe is a great contribution from the US. It has reduced poverty. Peace has been prevailed. But at the same time, we have not solved the problems of the world in terms of environmental blunders, poverty, hunger, conflicts. I believe that design is basically obsolete. You cannot have a design like that survive for 80 years. It is time to relook at the design. What does it mean to have UN in a hyper-connected world? What does it mean to have World Bank, IMF, NATO? Do we need new measurements for economy as opposed to GDP, GNP, something else? So I look at this whole thing from the viewpoint of the design that is 80 years old and what happened to that design. World got decolonized. China could rise to a level no one ever thought of. Soviet Union fell apart. 9/11 changed American mindset. Technology got democratized. Inequality increased. And finally, COVID-19 put entire world on a halt. And COVID-19 says we are all interconnected, interwoven, interrelated, interdependent. What happens in one part of the world is bound to spread everywhere. The physical borders, as we understand, have little meaning in one sense. So what are the real challenges today? We all understand the problems. The question is, what is the solution and what do we do about it? Problems are pretty well known. So when I look at the old design, I realize that the old design was based on democracy, human rights, capitalism, consumption, and military. Then world was bipolar. You had Soviet Union and you had US. Corona crisis tells us that there are only two things that matter: planet and people. Planet is in pain because we have really created a situation in environment that is really going to be a challenge for the mankind. We need planet. Planet doesn't need us. So we got to take care of our air, our water, our forest, ocean, environmental blunders, global warming. We have ignored the health of planet for too long. We have given a lot of lip service, but not much has happened. Two, people are in pain because of inequality. Very few people have lots of wealth and lots of people don't have enough to eat. We spend $2 trillion on defense when we know we can eliminate hunger for 200 billion. During Corona crisis, not a single global leader came forward and said, I will take part of my defense budget to improve my health infrastructure. Because the global conversation at G7 and G20 is all about geopolitical conflicts, trade, economy, military. It is not about planet and people. It pains me to hear all these global leaders basically act like salesmen. Everybody is looking at what is good for their country and not what is good for the planet and people. So that is what the book is about. Book is about taking democracy to inclusion, human rights to human needs, capitalism to new economy, conservation and sustainability as opposed to consumption. And finally, I hope that human civilization has gotten to a point we can sort our differences across the table. And we don't need nuclear armament to negotiate our strength. World is not about superpower. World is about humanity. World is about planet. So today you have two designs. You have American design, and now you have a Chinese design. I believe both designs are based on command and control. I would like a new design which is based on coordination, collaboration, cooperation, co-creation. A design that is based on networking of nations. And it is not idealist. Believe me, it can be done. We are all concerned about planet. We are all concerned about people. Poverty affects all of us. Hunger affects all of us. The question is who's going to take leadership to talk about a new conversation? And that's what I'm trying to propose. Not that I have all the solutions. I'm not an expert. I'm not an economist. I'm not a great scientist. I'm just an ordinary citizen who looks at things from different sets of glasses. Because I spent almost 60 years in US, 20 years in India, and going back and forth between these two great democracies, and I see world little differently. At the same time, I've been party to hyperconnectivity, not as an observer, but right inside at the table, working on transistors and computers and software. And when Intel was formed, I was there. I worked on 2-bit processor, 4-bit processor, 8-bit processor. I've gone through all of that, fortunately. I happen to be at the right place at the right time. How do we create this new conversation? That's all I'm asking for. And thank you for giving me this opportunity, Partha.
Thank you very much, Sam. So that leads to a very important second question. You know, the big message that you shared with us is switching from command and control structure, which is also my favorite, which is the classic military structure, right? To what I used to call the biological structure, where it's series of cells talking with each other. No one has extra power, right?
Hyperconnectivity term, it is networking.
Highway networking. So the question is, you know, when United Nations, the League of Nations earlier after the First World War, after the Second World War, United Nations, then the world, but they were created to create this collaboration and coordination, and they failed. We know, you know, I know, and there, you know, billions of dollars are spent on United Nations, but their effectiveness is almost close to zero. Now, what would need to happen to create the collaboration and coordination that you are talking about, and how do we begin the process?
You see, earlier we didn't have the tools of hyperconnectivity to collaborate well. And at UN, you had to meet physically to discuss things. You know, I go to these September, you know, conferences at UN many times as part of the Broadband Commission. And it's a chaos. The entire city of New York is on its knee because all these global leaders have flown with their own jets and with their own entourage. In a hyper-connected world, you need to operate differently. You really, truly have to have non-hierarchical architecture. See, the entire organizational architecture everywhere is obsolete. In all governments, we still follow vertical silos, while hyperconnectivity says flat organization. In UN, it is vertical silos, hierarchical. We need egalitarian management. So when I look at this in 2021, I feel that everything we do today is basically obsolete. Who decided it should take 4 years to get a degree? I want to question that. The entire world takes 4 years. Japanese, Chinese, Americans, Indians, Brazilians. Why? I think I want to question every aspect of this world today in light of hyperconnectivity. Are we going to do the same way things if we had a hyperconnected world? Our education must change. Our health service must change. Our governance must change. Do you really need a ministry of, let's say in India, you have Ministry of Shipping, Ministry of Steel. Do you really need a Ministry of Steel in this day and age? But we still do it. So I want to question everything. Again, not that I have answers to it, but I want young people to find new organizational architecture in governance, in education, in health, because today what we have doesn't work. Look at how do you get an admission in college? I mean, what kind of a process is that? Should we follow that in a hyper-connected world? No, but we still follow. Why does it take $200,000 to get an MBA? Can we democratize education? See, hyperconnectivity, Partha, one, democratizes knowledge, information. Two, decentralizes decision-making. This is to empower a human being. It has impact on democracy, decision-making, data gathering. This is not a telephone. This is to empower me. Three, it also demonetizes services. Telecom is almost free. Energy is going to be free very soon. Transportation is going to be completely free very soon. When self-driven car comes in, nobody would own a car. You won't need parking space. You won't need garage. You won't need to produce 50 million cars a year because 90% of the time car is parked. You may produce 5 million cars. So I see a huge change, but we are not prepared for it. Hyperconnectivity also is all about content, curation, context, and connectivity. There's a whole new culture where localization is going to play an important role. Not that globalization is not there, but there are things to globalize and there are things to localize. The whole idea of sort of, democracy, dictatorship, the idea of capitalism, socialism, I think that has to be broken. It's all about gray in between. There are no extremes anymore. And that's what hyperconnectivity allows us to do it.
So that leads to the next question. You in your book talk about 5 pillars. Inclusion, just for the audience, there are 5 pillars Sam talks about.
5 new pillars.
Right, 5 new pillars. And you talk about inclusion, human needs, new economy, conservation and sustainability, which was related to what you talked about, cars, for example, and nonviolence, right? Let me start with the point on nonviolence, because I could see you are a big disciple, as we are all of our, of Mahatma Gandhi, and he talked about nonviolence, but he was on the other side, lost his life because of violence, right? And so has been your friends, because you served Mrs. Gandhi, you served Rajiv Gandhi, you've seen a lot of violence in your lifespan. How do you begin the process to change society from being divisive to becoming inclusive when it has been ingrained in the DNA of individuals? Where do we begin?
I think, first of all, I would like to say that you cannot separate these 5 things.
Right.
You cannot just focus on sustainability and global warming as the key to future. That's one element. If you don't do all 5 things at the same time, you're not going to make a dent. I'm convinced of that. Violence begins at home. It begins on our streets. in our communities, in our neighborhood. If you look at the roots of violence, it is basically about exclusion. People get excluded and there is violence. All wars in the past have roots in exclusion. Murders of great leaders have roots in exclusion. Somebody feels that I was not included in this idea. So I think we need to focus on all five at the same time. And we are not going to make non-violent world overnight. It may take 100 years, it may take 50 years, but we got to start focusing on non-violence. We don't have global institution on non-violence. We don't have global institution on inclusion. Why don't we have a global institution at UN on inclusion? We have 17 goals at the UN as Sustainable Development Goals. They're great ideas. Nobody takes it seriously. Nobody does anything. We had Millennium Goals. What happened? Nothing much happened. So we systematically have to focus on new design of the world. We need to create new institutions and we need to kill some of the old institutions. With all the financial turmoil that is going on in the world, why don't we have global Federal Reserve of some kind? Why don't we have global intellectual property organization which gives one patent? Today, I file a lot of patents, and every patent filing is a huge, complicated process because every country wants their own. You have global business, you have local patents. Doesn't make sense. And I can give you examples after examples that the world we have today is not designed for the world of tomorrow. We have 19th century mindset, 20th century processes, and 21st century needs.
Problems, and 21st century problems.
And we can do it. We have so many intelligent people. We have so many good people with great intentions. But we are all locked up in wrong past. And we have to rise from that past and look beyond. You know, I meet so many good people, I tell you, in US, Europe, everywhere. And then I say, why are we in this mess? Because we listen to our leaders who basically focus on their votes, their constituency. I mean, look at what is going on in India. We are dividing people as opposed to joining people. Democracy is not inclusive in India because of focus on the religion. Dalits, in America, it's not inclusive because of Black Lives Matter. World over, we have a serious problem in dealing with people who look different, who believe in different things. Why? Diversity is great. I like Japanese food, I like Chinese food, I like Indian food, I like American hamburger. Diversity is to celebrate and not divide us. And it's not rocket science. What I'm saying is not great intellectual exercise. It's all common sense. You know, my grandparents told me these things. You know, Red Indians had better wisdom about our world than some of us have. So it is time to do a little bit of soul searching. And world will change only if each one of us change. World is not going to change from top down. It has to happen from bottom up. And I think it can be done. You know, and all I want to do is start a new conversation. I know I'm old. You know, I know there isn't much you can do at 80. Maybe you got another 5-10 years. But a lot of young people have their future at stake.
Absolutely.
I hope you can hear from other, you know, friends.
I would like actually to invite. So thank you very much, Sam. I mean, obviously we are in a very special situation, the progress of civilization. And I raised the question, the civility of civilization has disappeared we have to bring back the new kind of civility. So let me invite, particularly from the land of the rising sun, because it's almost becoming 12 o'clock their time. So Toyota-san or Ito-san, would you like to make any comments, questions based on the discussions that we have started? And then I'd like to invite John Kaufman, but let me quickly introduce Toyota-san. Toyota-san is perhaps, like Sam, has mixed with many world leaders. He has been in middle of discussion between prime ministers. He was heading up METI, where he was leading the Japan-US trade discussions. I once met him in Adams Hotel, if you remember, just opposite to White House, Toyota-san. So Toyota-san has really been in the middle of many discussions. So I would like Toyota-san to sort of either raise questions for Sam or any comments or observations that you have made as you dealt with world leaders around the world.
Well, Partha, thank you very much for inviting me to this interesting panel. And Sam, thank you very much for your explanation about redesign the world. I completely agree with you. We have to change. We have to redesign the world. But at the same time, I find it very, very difficult. For instance, in 7 years ago, 70 years ago, or 75 years ago, as you mentioned, there was a conflict between the United States and Soviet Union, and the world order was created, even though there was a conflict. But at that time, Soviet Union is living in a different world. I don't think the world order need the involvement of the Soviet Union. But at this time, the conflict is between United States and China. And China is a very important part of the world economy. And so we cannot separate them. We have to include them, but there is a conflict. And so it is extremely difficult to have a sort of consensus or sort of agreement. How do you overcome this conflict between two important players of the world? I really would like to listen to your answer. Thank you.
First of all, we need to really examine conflict in global terms. Their conflict is to sort of take the position of power. That is the old idea. You don't have to be a superpower to make better world. You could be number 2, number 3, number 5, and still lead morally. To be a moral leader, you don't have to be economic power or military power. Just because China has been very successful at economic development does not necessarily give China a license or US a license to say, I'm a superpower. So I think the idea of connecting superpower to economic prosperity has to be delinked. I don't see any conflict with China, personally. Okay. I'm happy that they are prospering. I'm happy that people are being lifted out of poverty. I'm happy that China is showing their presence outside. It's okay. But I would like China to have a little more openness. And I would like America to be open to others. You see, I would like China to be open inside. And I would like Americans to be open outside. So you can bring people at the table. So I think the conflict is unnecessary. Why can't we get together on a table with 5, 7, 10 countries and say, look, guys, humanity needs to be the focus. We need a new religion called radical humanism. Okay.
radical thought is important.
But why are we so hung up on religion? It's okay for you to be Christian, Jewish, Buddhist. I'm fine. Muslim, I don't want to worry about that. And it's okay for you to be superpower in your terms. But you got to treat others with respect, dignity. You got to be fair to others. Just because you have financial muscles doesn't make you superpower. That's my main concern.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I mean, look at when I go to Japanese, I feel at home. What a great civilization. Okay, I have no conflict. You know, why should Japanese be like me? Okay, it is okay for Japanese to be Japanese. I respect that. I love that. And I want to celebrate that. When I go to China, I'm very comfortable. Okay, I've been there many, many times. I have no problem. You know, so when do we rise to a level where we think of collaboration, not confrontation? I don't understand the root cause of confrontation between US and China. So market. Is it all about money? So Chinese get this bigger market, we do this market, you take on this, defense contract. Come on. Don't worry about those petty things. Worry about only two things, planet and people. When Chinese do something which hurts planet, I would speak against China. When Chinese do something that affects human beings, I will speak against it. Otherwise, I'm fine. They have right to do what they are doing. I respect that. But I also have a right to speak up. That doesn't mean I'm against China. That doesn't mean I'm against US. And this idea, a lot of my Indian friends say, oh, you lived in America for 60 years. Are you Indian or American? I said, I'm everything. I'm both. Of course, I'm American. And of course, I'm Indian. Don't define me the way you have been able to define in the past. In future, those definitions don't mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a human being first. If I see a little child being hurt in an accident, I'm not going to ask that child, what is your religion? What is your race? What do you believe in? I'm going to worry about that child. Doesn't matter whose child it is, because that's human. It just has to happen. I don't have to even try. And I think we are all good people. We all mean well. How do we bring good in us as opposed to evil in us? That's what I'm trying to say.
Sam, I have a question for both Toyoda-san and you, because both of you have dealt with many world leaders. I know you met with Mikhail Gorbachev.
I met with all of them, including all the 5 Japanese prime minister.
Japanese prime minister, and so did Toyoda-san. The question is that have you come across anyone where you felt that they understand the term humanism?
See, we don't have the kind of leaders that Gandhi, Mandela, Martin Luther King had, because they were not looking for votes. See, today's leaders are hung up on votes, constituency, power, prestige, position, as opposed to saying, my job is to lead, and my job is to lead humanity and planet. And when I go to G7, G20 meeting, I'm not going as a salesman. Today, they all go as a salesman. They're trying to sell something. Okay. I think we need different kinds of leaders. Leaders who go beyond self and truly focus on planet and people. We'll have a different world, I can tell you.
But then those leaders will be difficult to get elected because they do not think of the
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. And we don't need only elected leader to be worried about world. We don't need only elected leaders. There are other leaders, like all of these people here. They have a voice. They have, conscious. They can motivate people. They can mobilize resources.
Absolutely. That has been one of the motivation for Boston Pledge. We don't have to be part of any group.
So I would really like to resolve this China-US conflict in a different way.
Yeah, let me invite Professor Chen. Would you like to make any comments based on your observation? By the way, let me quickly introduce Professor Chen. He's one of the leaders of Tsinghua University. As you know, it is one of the most prestigious universities of the world, and the best of China goes to Tsinghua University. I met him about 5 years ago when I was invited to give a speech at the Tsinghua University, and there also we talked about next phase of China. That was the title of my speech. And he also leads the Innovation Center of Tsinghua University, and he also is the chief editor of Tsinghua Business Review, which is similar to Harvard Business Review.
Thank you.
Yes, Chen-san, what your thoughts?
Okay, thanks so much. Thank you, Pat, for your warm invitation, and also thank Sam. It's good pleasure to meet you. I think you are a very wise thinker for our humankind. So today we discuss about the tension for humankind. I think we should solve the problem because we need a more humanistic planet, more civilized society. So I believe that we should consider what is a better index for humankind, not only GDP or not only just sustainability. We should find a new measure to induce our political leader to move forward. Especially, I think we should solve the problem of Dr. Huntington, the measure called the conflicts of civilization. We should solve the problem. So let's work together for discuss how to understand each civilization. Like we should understand the Indian philosophy, Indian civilization, Japanese philosophy, Japanese civilization, and China's philosophy, Chinese philosophy, and Chinese civilization, etc. And also we Oriental people scholar together and discuss with those of Western civilization. So I think what do you think about how to make from traditionally intercultural learning to civilization discussion and dialogue? I think it's very important to understand each advantages and disadvantage of each civilization. Let's move civilization a high priority.
Absolutely.
To main targets for any project leader and any people. Let's move to a more human-centered society together. This, I think, is the only solution mentioned by Sam.
Dr. Chen, I believe hyperconnectivity can help take human civilization to the next level.
Yeah.
I believe that.
Okay, thanks. I agree. Yes.
And all we need is conversation. Everybody is great. Everybody means well. You know, I have no differences with anybody. I understand the conflict, and it's okay to have differences.
Yeah, sure.
Nothing wrong in having differences, but can we work around it? Can we respect that?
And learn from each other.
And not get into conflict. And don't get into confrontation and conflict immediately. Try to understand each other.
Absolutely.
But there are certain things non-negotiable.
Yeah.
You know, human values non-negotiable. Truth, trust, love, human freedom, respect. These are non-negotiable.
Yeah, this is we should do.
You cannot say I'm different and I want to kill everybody. That is not negotiable.
Yeah, that's right. It's the very unique, very internal.
We really need a global constitution. I talk about in this book. We need some minimum global constitution, which all our religions talk about.
That's right.
So we got to agree on some common minimum stuff, saying we got to respect each other. We got to be non-violent. Okay. We got to allow our freedom of thought, freedom of religion, which is okay. I have no problem with that. we can come to table and resolve these crazy ideas of superpower and control and military buildup and, nuclear armament. For what? What are we trying to do? When you spend $2 trillion a year, I live in Chicago for the last 57 years. Every summer, we lose 500 young kids to gun violence. And it hasn't changed in 57 years. I feel sorry. These are poor little kids who don't know anything. And they kill each other. For what?
Yeah. Yeah.
We have largest number of prisoners in the world in America, percentage-wise. Why? I don't get it. Okay. I was in Silicon Valley last month.
Let me bring John Hodgman, because he has to go a bit early.
Thank you.
And you're touched on the point of America. John, just to quickly introduce, I've lived through 4 decades, I would say, of entrepreneurship. He's done many companies, have born in Massachusetts because of him. He was the president of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts venture capital firm.
Wow.
He has funded many companies that you see today, and obviously has been at the center of entrepreneurship. He was a colleague of mine at the Tufts University. We are great friends. So let's move from the east to the west. We'll go back to the east.
Sure, thank you.
You're not giving up, but we'll mix it up. Now, so with that, John, any comments, questions, thoughts?
Yes, thanks for inviting me to participate today. Sam, I agree with you that hyperconnectivity has been a great boon and offers great potential. But there's been, in the United States at least, a dark side to hyperconnectivity, and that is through social media, the creation of silos of people who have knowledge and apparent knowledge of facts that are completely different from reality. And so I'd like you to talk a little bit about how we address the dark side, because that is having a profound effect on American democracy right now.
Thank you, John. I really agree with you. And I'm equally concerned about it. We have just started a small group, John, a global group on looking at the rights of a digital citizen. See, the problem today in social media is the business model, which says you get paid more for clicks. And you can increase clicks if you create conflicts. In addition, social media has unauthenticated behavior. There are 8 Facebook pages on Sam Pitroda. I don't know who are these people. You can create a page. So there is unauthenticated behavior because the business model was more people you sign up, more valuation you get. So Sam Pitroda can sign up as 20 people. If Partha says something, 20 Sam Pitrodas can criticize him. And everybody says, oh, 20 people criticized him. That's not true. Not 20 people did not criticize him. One guy tweeted 20 times. So until we change that business model, and you have seen what is going on with Facebook in the last few weeks, we have to change that business model. Given a choice, I would like 2 parts of internet, true internet and false internet. I identify myself saying, I am Sam Pitroda. Whatever I say, I take responsibility. I can't hide behind and say all kinds of things to people as someone who is not a real human being. That is the problem with internet today. I think it will be sorted out. I think it is a knee-jerk reaction to a new tool that we have discovered. So when you look at human history, you will say, for 20 years, we misused hyperconnectivity. I have great faith in our ability to recover from it. And I think process has started, to be frank. And enough of us will have to speak up and say, look, you cannot go on propagating lies on media. You cannot attack people unnecessarily. If you do, you got to take responsibility. Say, I am this person. Until we do that, I think we will be in a mess for a while.
Now, John, you talked about social media. Obviously, that's something also worries me. And the youngest person that we have in the panel is Shin Ito, Dr. Ito. Dr. Ito is a professor, consultant, thought leader, working with a lot of young startups in Japan. I was wondering, Ito-san, from your perspective, when you look at the world of social media and look at the Japanese culture and the effect of social media on Japanese culture versus what you read about in America, do you see any similarities, differences, challenges that you could elaborate on?
Well, I think that social media in Japan is quite popular, and there are certain people who represent themselves truthfully, and many people, and depending on the media, misrepresent themselves, so that they say things quite freely without a solid background on the information. And that is really hurting the society. So it's, I think, quite similar to the one in the US.
Everywhere. It's same in India too. It is same everywhere.
How do you see it in China, Jen? Yes, muted, I think.
You're muted.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, is it similar in China also that people are free, or there is a bit more tempered?
Yes, sir.
They're a bit more tempered.
Yeah.
See, that's where I feel, there has to be a beautiful balance that we have to think of, decentralized approach, because there would be always someone who could upset the system.
Yes.
And the governance, or if you will, some kind of oversight mechanism, which by definition becomes centralized. So how to strike that balance between centrality, which is overseeing the governance of a system, at the same time allow freedom of expression, because everyone is not good, unfortunately.
But I think, Partha, it is about control and conscious.
Exactly.
Yes,
Okay.
Yes.
Do you control everybody to put them online? American model is to develop consensus.
So how to build the consensus?
And then it takes time. It takes time. There is penalty to pay. In democracy, there is certain penalty to pay. Freedom does not come without cost. So
now that leads to a very good question Puran Dang has raised. I could see it on the chat box, Q&A.
Yeah.
To share with you. What he has raised it for you and me, Sam. And he's saying there are a lot of young men and women would agree with what we are discussing today. But unfortunately, there is no university or educational setup that they could go to where they could create the new mindset that we are talking about.
So you can start an institute of leadership to emphasize moral leadership. Possible. But it's not a rocket science. Believe me, you don't need a PhD in this. Okay. You really need to understand truth, trust, love, inclusion, diversity, democracy, justice, freedom. You understand these and practice this properly. You don't need a PhD in this. My grandfather was not educated, couldn't read or write, but he somehow, I don't understand why, believed in all of these things. Okay.
Absolutely. That leads me to Larry Kaufman, Dr. Larry Kaufman. Let me introduce him. There have been a CEO role in many companies, and he has taken many companies on the upside track and recovered many companies from being in trouble, turned around many companies, got them married, got them divorced. He's known for M&A. And I would like to, Larry, you to raise some questions or thoughts, particularly in the view of the last discussion, that how do we help to change the mindset, particularly people who are in business, because they are measuring their success based on dollars, based on profit. They are responsible to their shareholders, and that's the way it is. How do we bring that change?
Sure.
Dr. Pitroda, thank you for your insightful book. And Partha, thank you for inviting me. So one of the things I've learned in business is if you want change and you want action, you have to know where you're going, but you also have to focus at the beginning. What are the first things that you can do? Now, Dr. Pitroda, in your book, you say that you need a catalyst to break the status quo and institute change. So in my mind, when I read that, I was thinking, well, what kind of catalyst will do this? Is it a positive catalyst where an important problem is solved? Or is it a negative catalyst that causes pain and suffering for a group? And also I thought a little bit about, could there be an active group that could go around and maybe make sure that the right leaders are brought into different countries and have a more active role? So how can we influence the presence of a catalyst, and what kind of catalyst? Because it's not going to happen by itself.
Agree with you, Larry. You know, I tell my friends, I wish I was a billionaire, people will pay attention. Unfortunately, I'm not. I wish I was a Nobel laureate or some great professor, people will pay attention. I'm just an ordinary guy, you know. But I need Dr. Chen and Dr. Ito and Kaufmans of the world and Parthas of the world to join in this idea. You know, we all have to believe we need change agents of all kinds. You know, I think Mandela lost the opportunity in Africa. I think Obama lost the opportunity in America. I sincerely believe that. Okay. And I don't think we can allow that opportunity to be lost. So global dialogue. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Sorry.
One other comment. So in the US, we have a way of creating a group that influences. May not be a good group, but lobbyists. We raise money, we create a PAC, and we start paying to get the right leaders in and the bad leaders out. Does that work on a global scale? Could it work?
Yes, it works. It works on global scale because money talks everywhere. Money matters everywhere, unfortunately or fortunately. But I think the key is, what do we do with what we already have today? One thing is to, you know, work long term and wait for 10 years to come up with the right leader. But can we really influence the existing leaders and say, look, we need to change quickly. And it is good for everybody. It is good for America to really focus on planet and people. It is good for India. It is good for China. It is good for Japan. And for that, you don't need to fight. All we need is one global leader, whether it is, you know, Chinese leader or American leader, with credibility to say, hey, let's sit down and talk about the new world order. Nobody's doing that today. Okay. If I had an opportunity to talk to them for, you know, 1 hour, I am confident that I can convince them of thinking differently. But you don't get an opportunity to talk to them for an hour. You know, I did this in 1980, asked Prime Minister of India to listen to me for an hour. And she gave me 10 minutes, I canceled it. I waited for 8 more months and she gave me 1 hour. This was 1980. And I said, IT and telecom will change the face of India. Let me do it. And she said, go do it. And I was the one who changed the face of IT and telecom in India 40 years ago. It can be done. Okay. One man. She trusted me. She said, go do it. Okay.
Sam, I've got a question. This is a very important point you just now made, because a lot of us try, but we fail. But you succeeded with Mrs. Gandhi. And what did you do? What is the lesson learned from your experience with Mrs. Gandhi? I know she was obviously in demand, a very famous personality, one of the first women prime ministers of a major country like India. How did you influence her? What did you do?
I asked for an hour. I said, if you're not serious and give me 10 minutes, I don't talk to you. You got to sit there and listen to me for an hour. And she had her entire cabinet. And my message was very simple. IT and telecom will change the face of India. You can do it on your own. You have enough talent in young. It should be indigenous development, rural telecom, local production, blah, 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 blah. And I don't need anything from you. I don't need your job. I don't need salary. I don't need title, but I want to do it. Give me a chance to do it. And she said, okay, do it. So first important thing was political will. If you do not have political will, you can't do much in this world. With political will, you need domain expertise. And with domain expertise, you need a large group of people who can help you execute. First thing is political will. If 10 global leaders today say, okay, do it. Sam, Chen, Ito, Kaufman, go do it. Then all these great people will come together, work on it, saying we have political will. We are domain experts in various things. We'll find the right people because we don't know everything. We'll find the environmental expert. We'll find the water expert. We'll find, psychologist, and then we'll work together and solve this problem. We can do it. But without political will, it's a non-starter.
Absolutely. So that's the key. Maybe we could form a group today, this group, which will begin the process.
Yes,
Can
please.
I raise a question along that?
Yes, sir.
In relation to Japanese corporates, that is, Japanese companies have lost its sort of global presence it used to enjoy. And
I know.
I see that many company leaders recognize that they need to do something, but they have not really done yet. And many companies are aware that they need to initiate new business initiatives, but they are not really committed to it. They have an idea, but their commitment level is so low. And your discussion, Sam, that the leaders need to have the will to do it. So the Japanese leaders, corporate leaders, have become gained their positions by being very friendly with their associates and avoiding failures, so that they are very risk averse. How would you plant such spirit of challenge and willingness to change?
I have spoken to some Japanese leaders in private over a period of time, and I agree with you completely that there is no political will. The only way to do this, if Dr. Ito says, I'm going to put 20 top leaders in one room for 2 days, where Sam and Ito and Partha and Kaufman and Dr. Chen or whatever are going to say, 2 days we are going to spend together to develop consensus and political will. When we come out of that room after 2 days or 1 day, we will have a press conference and we're going to tell the world that we have come to understanding and this is what we are going to do. Once you have political will, you also need to make public commitment. Political will in isolation doesn't help. Okay, so when Prime Minister of India had political will, I went to the press and said, this is what Prime Minister said. Prime Minister is all for it, so you can't back out. You got to use all of these things effectively. And we know how to do it. We've done it all along. Okay. We need people to come together and listen. If Dr. Ito brings 10 business leaders with a couple of catalysts, we become catalysts, saying, look, this is a concern. You all know it. Can we come together? Get your fears out. And if you announce political will, this is how it will happen. And there are enough talented people in Japan who will make it happen. And they will connect with other people outside Japan. It is okay, because we are all human beings. We want to help Japan. Japan wants to help us. Okay. You know, why wouldn't I want Japan to succeed? You know, why wouldn't I want Africa to succeed? Because it is good for all of us. You know,
Yeah.
I don't look at Japanese as competition. No.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you call 10 leaders, I'll come. I'm telling you, it can be done. I know many of them. Okay, but I'm too old and most of my friends retired or died. You know, but I had a very close friend at Oki, Dr. Owaku, and he and I used to talk about this at length. But this was in 1979, long time ago. Can be done.
Yeah. So what we will do now.
Sorry, Larry, did I answer your question properly?
Yes, that I guess each individual leader is afraid to move forward, but as a group, they may be able to step forward.
Exactly. But you need somebody to bring them together, somebody to talk to them, somebody to catalyze, you know.
Yeah.
Which Ito-san and I have started. We had a very good conference about 8 months ago, right, Ito-san?
Yeah.
No, Partha, you got after conference, there has to be result, there has to be a public announcement, there has to be a declaration, all that has to be done. Otherwise, conference is a conference.
Yeah, I know.
Everybody says great conference, nothing happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have to think in those terms today as well, to see what is the next step. You know what I would like to suggest, Devinder, we have received thousands of questions from the audience. So if you could pick and choose some of the important ones in the context of discussion for the panel, not only for Sam, so that we could reflect on it. Would you take over from here?
Sure, Dr. Ghosh.
And we'll be brief also.
Be very brief. Just make the key points of the question. Yeah.
Sure. After listening to all of the great thoughts, I could remember one saying of my father. He said that for a family to grow, every member must contribute meaningfully. So I asked myself a question: is this world not a family?
Yes, it is.
How could we afford to grow, neglecting the 70% of the population which is struggling to live?
Absolutely. I agree.
We all agree. So okay, go to the questions.
Sure. Well, we have a question from Devabrata De. He says, Sam, what is your reaction about crushing the human rights of women in Afghanistan by Taliban? Why Biden and Putin are not sending strong words to Taliban to establish equal rights both for men and women? Modi is sending strong message.
My answer is in your question. My answer is already in your question. How could I agree to that? You know, how could I not respect women's right? You know, it's humanity. Absolutely. Okay.
Right. We have a few more questions coming up. And we have a question from Krishan Khanna. He says, tax havens need to be dismantled. They are designed to disrupt the planet. What are world leaders trying to prove?
Agree, they'll work on it. But you know, we should not get into micromanagement. Okay, this is micromanagement. Saying, who is going to fix my road? Okay, fine, it's an important issue. But we are talking about larger issues. Okay, tax is a small little item. Of course, it is important. Corruption is important. I agree that we need to eliminate corruption. But we are talking about a grand design. Are we really willing to focus on inclusion, human needs, new economy, conservation and sustainability, and non-violence. Underneath that, there are a lot of little issues in each of these. But once we agree to the larger design, then we can talk about details. Okay.
We have a comment from Jaya Jwalapuram. The comment is, people should care about the planet. Awareness of environment is lacking. What the panelist has to say on this?
You increase awareness. Increase awareness, talk more about it, read more about it, promote. There is enough literature out there. We agree.
Right. So next is a thought of mine that or a question to the panelist, that how do we instill the feeling of connectedness and bring the larger purpose to every people's mind?
I think we need open conversation, Devendra. We need a lot more dialogue and sincere dialogue. We are not having broader conversation with large number of people. We got to listen to people. We can't just assume that that person is bad or this idea is bad. We got to be able to listen to people openly. It's okay to have differences. But we have this mindset, that XYZ already comes there with a baggage. And if we are not open to listen to other people, you cannot solve problems. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Dr. Pitroda. Next, we have a question from Krishan Khanna. Present expenses on armaments are planned to destroy, kill mankind. They are not made to protect this planet from outside threats. What this panelist has to say on the armaments, ammunitions, and bombs, etc.
We should reduce defense budget everywhere. We should work together to use those resources for saving people and not for killing people. But it is not going to happen overnight. But we got to start that process. Okay. We cannot go on spending $2 trillion every year in the world on defense. It's just not a good thing to do. Okay.
Right. I see many comments coming from Puran Dang, and I know Mr. Dang is one of the senior most IITians. Mr. Dang said,
he's a very good friend of mine.
Good to know, sir. He says, Global University of Leadership and Global Document of Behavior by all nations. So this is his comment. If you would want to add something to it.
No, I think Global Leadership School is a good idea if somebody wants to start. And I do believe that we need to start working on a global constitution, minimum constitution that we all accept. And then we negotiate. And then we add as we go along to that document. Why should every country should have their own constitution? I don't get it. There must be something common. Can we call out what is common and agree to it?
Sam, you may know, Puran knows about it. I have sponsored a leadership academy in IIT. Unfortunately, it's moving very slow. The money has been given. The content has been given. In fact, Tsinghua University also wants to do it. Peking University wants to do it. But we were thinking of positioning that in Kharagpur as the center. Would you be able to help me to take it forward? I mean, it's
Sure. Be happy to do it. We'll be very happy to do it. But I really want to worry about today.
Yeah, it's today. It's Leadership Academy.
Yeah, fine.
Everything
good. I'll be more than happy to do it.
Okay, well, that's one action item for today. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Devendra, any other points?
Yeah. We have another comment from Mr. Dang. He says the conflict is in in the inner soul, we need change of heart and universal respect.
That's the leadership academy.
Agree. Okay. I think we all have to change. Okay. We have to be open. I can give you one simple example. Sometimes I have discussion with my friends about China in India, and immediately there is animosity. And they think I'm friend of China, I'm friend of Pakistan. No, you don't have to be enemy of anybody. Okay, why start with that conversation? And the response then is, oh, you are anti-national. It's crazy to think like that. But that's what people think. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if I may share a thought of mine, I feel we all are connected. It's only the degree of relevance which varies. Today, physically, through the networks of communication, we could see and talk to each other, but on the metaphysical level, we all are connected. Every life is connected. Probably it's the realization of that thought which could make the world a better place.
Well, Corona crisis has told us we are all connected. I mean, Corona crisis told us that, if you travel, be careful, because we are all connected. It doesn't matter where you are. What else we need? It was almost like Third World War, according to me. Okay, aren't we going to learn from this? That we are all connected, we all matter. Okay, and there is some little virus in middle of nowhere can put entire world to halt. Our economy can be shattered. And how could we not work together? Who is our enemy? Is Corona our enemy? So I think you need different mindset.
Absolutely.
May I make a comment?
Please.
I think that we now live on this hyper-connected world, and we are like each cell in a body, and we are all connected through blood and all the biological systems. At the same time, there are certain cells that suck up all the nutrients. And some peripheral cells go to necrosis. Now, these certain cells of privilege are all in the closed system where they share certain proprietary information and have a lot of resources. How would you open up this small number of cells?
I don't know. I'm not knowledgeable really to comment. I don't know enough about it. Maybe I need to learn something, read something, but there are experts who will be able to answer your question much better than I can.
So that's a very good question, though. Yeah, very good thought. Because one thing I do in the corporate world is to promote, as you know, Ito-san, the biological model. But it only works if each cell behaves with certain respect for the other cells. But if one cell sucks up all the nutrients, that's very well said. How do you manage the system? That's a very good question. Devendra, I see a question coming from Bahrain, a good friend of mine, Dr. Nazar Al Barna. Could you give a chance? He wants to speak.
Okay. In this case, may I request Raj to unmute Mr. Bahrain?
In the meantime, Larry,
Larry wanted to say something. Larry?
Yeah, I did. I would.
Larry wants to say something. Yeah. Larry, please.
So I think that one of the important things to begin the process of any change is we need to achieve a consensus for change around the world. And to do that in today's environment, we need a global leader that's acceptable to everybody. Right. I don't believe that leader can come out of India or China or the US because of built-in prejudices, lifetime prejudices or
Yep.
from Russia, that leader needs to emerge from a very neutral place and somehow needs to be helped along the path. And that leader needs to develop followers who will also lead change. Do you see that this could happen?
Well, unfortunately, if leader came from some small country, he won't get the respect.
Hmm.
You know, it's just we live in a world which is, which sort of has a golden rule. One who has gold makes the rule. You know, these little countries don't have the gold. So maybe it has to come from non-political sphere. Okay. I think
a good example
from
was
non-political sphere, it may be probably more effective. But I think US has a lot to contribute. China has a lot to contribute. India has a lot to contribute. Japan has a lot to contribute. They're all great nations, you know. I don't expect this kind of leadership coming out from Sierra Leone or some small country in Africa. It might, okay, but I think it will be difficult for people to. Mandela could have done it.
I think at one point, Lee Kuan Yew from Singapore was trying, but exactly what Sam's saying, coming from a small country, people respected him, but did not listen to him. I think Switzerland, the World Economic Forum, tried to do it, but it became, again, a very political place, as you know, Sam. People come there to show off their mights. They never achieved anything. But that's a very good point.
If we can force G20, G7 to listen for an hour or two, we may change their mind. May. I don't know. But if it came, for example, let's say the leader of China says, hey, I want all of us to listen to this idea. Everybody will pay attention. Okay. If leader of some little country says, I want you to listen to this idea, nobody will pay attention. If Biden says, I want to have a conversation on this, redesign the world, people will pay attention. Okay. Because you need that credibility.
And that comes with size.
Size, position, you know.
Absolutely.
If Japanese Prime Minister said to G7 that, hey, I want to devote 1 or 2 hours in this group to talk about redesigning the world. Conversation begins. Everybody will start thinking. All the local experts will join. You know, as soon as it is discussed at that level, Chinese intellectuals will join, Japanese intellectuals will join, American intellectuals will join. It will happen. Okay. But one person has to propose that with great respect and saying, I'll tell you what, you know, when Gorbachev came to India, I wanted to spend 1 hour with Gorbachev. And Prime Minister said, no problem, Sam, I'll organize it. And poor Prime Minister of India could not organize because Soviet Union bureaucracy and Indian bureaucracy did not agree that I should be given 1 hour. Okay. So then what I told Prime Minister, I said, look, he's coming to your house for dinner. Why don't you tell him that after dinner, you want to meet a guy called Sam Pitroda? He said, fine. So Gorbachev had dinner with Rajiv Gandhi at his house. 10:30 at night, Rajiv Gandhi tells Gorbachev, I want you to talk to Sam Pitroda for an hour. And I got an hour. Okay. And in that hour, we accomplished so much between US and Soviet Union. You know, immediately next week, you know, 30 Soviet experts came to India and we did this and we did that. But it needed political will. Bureaucracy did not give us. So you got to do these kinds of things. You know, somebody has to sort of say to this G9, G20 meeting that after dinner tonight, we're going to spend an hour on redesigning the world. You're done. You know, and I can assure you, if Chinese leader says it, nobody will have guts to say no. If Biden says it, nobody will have guts to say no. Okay.
So between Larry Kaufman and Professor Chen, we have the opportunity.
I'm just giving an idea. Okay, we can discuss more about it.
Good point. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, I'm just, you know, I'm speaking openly without paying too much attention to, you know, whether it is politically right to say or wrong to say. I'm just opening my heart.
One person has written here something very interesting where we started today. It's from Dharma Chatterjee, he's a good friend of mine. He's writing, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. That's why United Nations was created. So why don't we try to activate it and use it? We, the nations of the world, created it after all, after a great human loss, which is the Second World War. I think that could what do you think, Sam? Do you think, or
Credibility.
the whole panel, huh?
Credibility.
Credibility of United Nations.
Yeah, could I make
I would say Chinese Prime Minister and American President has more credibility than head of UN, unfortunately.
Yeah, Larry?
Yeah, so the UN has a fatal flaw. They talk a lot and there's very little action.
Yep.
And part of that is because of the fact that some of the bigger member nations have veto power, so
Right.
they can stop things, and they do frequently. So should the US try to fix the UN? Should we withdraw?
Yes, that's part of the plan in the book. We got to redesign UN.
Should we abandon the UN and
So
start?
we don't have to abandon. I think it's a good platform. We got to redesign. We got to redesign World Bank. We got to redesign IMF. World Bank was okay when there was no Goldman Sachs and JP Morgans and big other banks. Now, you got all kinds of global banks, but we need global Federal Reserve. Do we really need 300 currencies today? I'm talking about that in the book. Maybe we need 7 currencies. Maybe we need baskets of currencies which make global currency. Okay. You got to do all these things in globalized world. You cannot have 300 currencies. It was an old idea. That time is over. Nor can you have, according to me, cryptocurrency. Too volatile. It has to be backed by the government. Okay. It has to have some stability. And Chinese came forward and said it. And I'm glad Chinese did that, to be very frank. Okay. Another person who can get a lot of, support is even Putin. If Putin suggested this, I'm sure people will pay attention. But Chinese and American are the best today. Just to propose saying we need at these great meetings 1 hour conversation on redesigning the world. Just that, and it'll happen. Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Devendra, anything else? Any questions?
Yeah, you want to?
Yes. Before I hand over the podium to Dr. Ghosh to sum up the session, I would request the panelists to come up with 1 sentence that they would love to add to the pool of thoughts. So let me begin from Ito-san.
Well, I think that the 7 principles that Sam talked about is very, very important to every humankind. And that is something that we should remember and talk about among ourselves. Thank you.
Now, may I request Dr. Kaufman, please?
Yes. We need to find a leader who will let us recognize the catalyst that we need to begin to change. Not sure how to do that, but maybe we're not too old to do that ourselves.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Kaufman. May I request Dr. Chen, please?
Okay, let's move to our more civic society and make the world more prosperity with happiness, using our traditional ancient wisdom to help our humankind.
Thank you. Dr. Toyoda, please.
Well, thank you very much. I completely agree with Samson in terms of overviewing what is happening in the world. But I'm a little bit more pessimistic about how to operationalize. I think, yes, probably the best way to realize that is to let Samsung to have 1 hour at the G7, 1 hour at the G20, 1 hour at the US-China negotiation teams. And then perhaps I can be a little bit more optimistic. Thank you.
Thank you. Anjum, would you like to add a point?
Thank you, Devinder. I might not be a panelist, but I've learned much from all the global thought leaders who spoke on different aspects of today's overarching theme. And for me, at least, I believe that all change begins with the self, and we have to start at a micro level before moving on to higher things. Individual accountability is something I very much adhere to. And I think that before telling others what they should or could do, we need to hold ourselves accountable and see whether we are doing our bit for the concerns that our generation as well as younger generations are facing on this planet. Whether that's climate change, whether that's human rights violations, whether that's any other concern from poverty to war to conflict to tax havens to a singular currency. Are we doing what we can in our capacity first before pointing fingers at others? Thank you.
Thank you, Anju. Now, may I request Dr. Pitroda, please?
Well, first of all, once again, I want to thank Partha and the Boston Pledge. But if I have to summarize in one sentence, I would say I am more hopeful today after listening to the panelists than I was yesterday. The panelists gave me lots of hope. What Toyota-san said, Ito-san said, what Dr. Chen said, what Dr. Kaufman said, and John and Partha makes me feel that there is some hope. There are other people who are equally concerned. And it is not a lonely battle. So I am very excited. I'm very thankful to all of you for giving me your time, for giving me your moral support. You mean a lot to me. The fact that you spend 2 hours with me, it itself is a great honor. And I'm very thankful to you. I sincerely believe that. And I hope we can continue this conversation. And thank you, Partha, for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Over to you, Dr. Ghosh.
Yeah, let me have the privilege to summarize. You know, I'm highly touched. I do have tears in my eyes. And I must say that what we learned today from each one of you, including series of points I see from the people who attended today, you know, there's so many points, you'll be surprised. You know, there's a talk about university, there's a talk about education, is amazing. So I agree with Sam that this is a great event. So what does it say? You know, I would like to put the Vedic philosophy in focus. You know, Vedic philosophy, as many of you know, those who do not know, was a philosophy which developed in the foothills of Himalayas about 3,000, 4,000 years ago. And the first one is Rig Veda. And Rig Veda's first chapter is, in the beginning is desire. So what I learned today, that there is a true desire among this group that we want to begin the change. And desire is a very powerful force. So one of the things that, in honor of Sam and all of you, that I would like to commit on behalf of Boston Pledge, to convert the desire into action. Point one. Second thing that I take from here, which Toyota-san suggested, and Toyota-san, you are perfectly positioned, along with Sam and Mr. Chen, that we have to organize soon 3 one-hour meetings one with G7, one with G20, and one in the US-China, not only trade, I would say US-China dialogues beyond trade, everything. And I think if we have the desire, we should be able to do that. And Mr. Chen, Dr. Chen, I'll work with you because Tsinghua University is highly respected by Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping himself is from PKU. Both the universities are next to each other. We can make it happen. And as you know, in this group, we have people who have dealt with individuals of that level. In fact, first time when I met Sam Pitroda, if you, Sam, remember, outside of the office of Rajiv Gandhi. I was waiting, you were coming out. Rajiv Gandhi invited me to talk about country strategy. So, we have, and of course, Toyoda-san has dealt with series of prime ministers over the last 30 years from Japan and from all over the world. So we do have the clout, we do have the intellectual and the spiritual base to do so. So we'll take on that challenge, Sam, in the honor of the book.
Great.
Talk about action. The third thing that came, Sam, which is, I'll put it on your lap. You may know about a year ago, not actually 3 years ago, I committed to building a leadership academy. And it was prompted by one of the leaders in Waseda University in Japan, and then by Peking University and Tsinghua University. So I created a base at IIT Kharagpur. And the funds have been provided, the content has been provided, the progress has been very slow. And everything that we discussed today is pointing towards human conscience, leadership, how to connect with the planet. So if you kindly take action, because IITs take instruction from the Prime Minister.
I will do that.
That would be
I'll do my best.
Excellent. And the third thing that, which is very
Fourth.
Fourth. I know you're counting. I have to be careful. The fourth thing that is very important is what I think Ito-san talked about, and I think I'll work with Toyoda-san. Japan is a very important player. Japan is the first country in the last 500 years proven to the world, to the Western world, that Eastern world can perform. It created 100 brand names in a short period between 1965 to 1980, 15 years. Now, China is trying to follow the model with 1.4 billion people, which China did with 100 million people. I think the resurrection of Chinese confidence, if I may use the word, is very important. So I would request Toyoda-san and Ito-san to organize a special meeting on this book for the top 20 leaders of Chinese corporates. It could be done, and I think we could.
You mean Japanese?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that could be done. I think we'll organize within 2 months. I know Toyoda-san has got all kinds of linkages with RITI. We already proposed one, which I would like to take forward, because I did a conference, Sam, with Ito-san about 6 months ago. How could Japanese economy define its next phase after 3 decades of drought? From 1990 to 2020, Japan has been flat. So that was very well accepted. We could continue that. And I would like you to join that meeting, Sam.
Thank you.
If we could do that. So these are the 3 action items. So I think, as you could see, with Boston Pledge, 5 action items. Sam is keeping track on my points. Thank you very much, Sam. But these are the 5 action items. And I would definitely follow up. I think we have to do it. It's required. Otherwise, it's all talk, as you said. Always you talk about NATO, no action, all talk. We have to avoid that. I agree with you. But at the same time, talk is required to build consensus. It's not an easy topic that, Sam, you've written on. And so thank you very much. I hope
you, everybody.
Summary.
Been a privilege.
Yeah, we will work together.
And, all my colleagues on the panel, please feel free to call me, talk to me. Partha has my telephone number. Dr. Kaufman is in Boston, so we can always have a chat, maybe a cup of coffee on Zoom. Okay.
I think we will also invite Toyota to Chicago.
Yes.
Toyota is a product.
Now we can have a coffee on Zoom.
Yeah, we can have a
You
coffee.
get your cup of coffee, I get my cup of coffee, and we have a chat.
Maybe a more convenient time for Toyota-san.
Yeah.
It's
Anytime.
now 1 o'clock in the morning.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you
Really,
very much. Thank you very much.
this has been amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you, all of you, for
Indeed.
your time. You have been amazing. Thank you.